Olivia Montgomery's blood boiled as she stood before the town council of Willow Creek, her fists clenched at her sides, refusing to back down despite the 6 stern-faced men glowering at her from behind their polished oak table. It was 1876, and the small Wyoming Territory town had never witnessed such defiance from a woman, especially not the 22-year-old daughter of the recently deceased town doctor. "Miss Montgomery, we've heard quite enough of your opinions," Mayor Hargrove said, his mustache twitching with displeasure. "Your father may have allowed such unseemly behavior, but without his protection, you must learn your proper place." Olivia lifted her chin, her auburn hair catching the late afternoon light streaming through the town hall windows. "My proper place. And what might that be, Mayor? Silent and subservient while you gentlemen squander the town's money on a new saloon instead of the school we desperately need." A gasp rippled through the small crowd gathered to witness the proceedings. Women simply didn't speak this way to men of position, especially not in public. "This is precisely the problem," Councilman Phillips interjected, his jowls quivering with indignation. "No man will ever marry a woman with such a sharp tongue. It's unnatural." "I'd rather remain unmarried than silent," Olivia retorted, her green eyes flashing. Since her father's passing 3 months ago, she discovered disturbing discrepancies in the town's financial records while sorting through his papers. Her father had been the only council member to oppose the new saloon, arguing for educational funding instead. Now she understood why. Mayor Hargrove's face purpled. "Miss Montgomery, this council has reached its decision. You have 2 days to vacate your father's property, which reverts to town ownership to settle his alleged debts. Furthermore, your continued presence in Willow Creek is deemed disruptive. You are hereby banished from town limits." "Banished?" Olivia's voice barely concealed her shock. "On what grounds?" "Slander against town officials, public disruption, and moral impropriety," Councilman Williams read from a prepared statement, not meeting her eyes. Olivia knew the real reason. She'd discovered their embezzlement scheme, and they feared she would expose them. Her father's sudden heart failure now seemed suspiciously convenient. "You cannot do this," she said, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "It's done," Mayor Hargrove declared, bringing down his gavel with finality. 2 days, Miss Montgomery. After that, the sheriff will escort you out personally." As Olivia stumbled from the town hall into the dusty Main Street, her mind raced. Where would she go? How would she survive? Her father had taught her medicine, but no town would hire a female doctor, especially not one with her reputation. The Montgomery name, once respected throughout the territory, was now tarnished. Mrs. Winters, the milliner's wife, scurried across the street to avoid her. Former patients who had smiled gratefully when her father treated their ailments now looked away. She was already an outcast. Numb with shock, Olivia made her way back to the 2-story house that had been her home for all her life. Inside, she sank into her father's leather chair in his study, surrounded by medical texts and memories. Tears threatened, but she fought them back. Crying wouldn't solve anything. She needed a plan. Selling her possessions might give her enough money for a stagecoach ticket to Cheyenne or Denver, where she could perhaps find work as a nurse. But starting over alone terrified her. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Wiping her eyes, she composed herself before answering. Sheriff Taylor stood on her porch, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. At 45, he'd been her father's friend, but his loyalty to the town council was unwavering. "Miss Montgomery, I came to make sure you understood the council's ruling. That I'm being thrown out of my own home and town on false pretenses." "Yes, Sheriff, that was quite clear," she replied coldly. He shifted his weight. "Look, Olivia, I've known you since you were knee-high. This isn't personal. It feels rather personal from where I'm standing." The sheriff sighed. "The council's given me orders to assist with your departure. I can arrange passage on Friday's eastbound stage if you'd like." "How thoughtful," she said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "And where exactly am I supposed to go? Denver, maybe." "Big city might suit a forward-thinking woman like yourself." He offered a weak smile that disappeared under her glare. "Your father had friends there." My father had friends here too, she said pointedly, or so I thought. Sheriff Taylor had the decency to look ashamed. Times are changing, but not fast enough for what you're wanting. Women voting, women doctoring, it makes folks uncomfortable. Truth often does, she replied. After the sheriff left, Olivia began the heartbreaking task of deciding what few possessions she could take with her. Her medical books, certainly, some clothes, her mother's locket. Everything else, the furniture, her father's equipment, generations of memories would be seized. As evening fell, she sat at her father's desk writing letters to his few remaining friends in neighboring towns, hoping against hope that someone might offer her sanctuary. None seemed promising. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. Olivia had barely slept, but determination had replaced her initial shock. If she must leave, she would do so with dignity. She spent the day packing and selling what small items she could to neighbors brave enough to come to her door. By dusk, she had accumulated almost $80, hardly enough to start a new life, but better than nothing. As she closed up her medical bag, a commotion outside caught her attention. The rapid thunder of hooves approached her house, followed by shouts and a woman's desperate cry. Instinctively, Olivia rushed to the door. A group of riders had stopped outside, one man cradling someone in his arms. "Help, we need help," a deep voice called out. Without hesitation, Olivia flung open the door. A tall man with broad shoulders dismounted from a palomino, carefully holding a young woman whose dress was soaked with blood. "Please," he said, his blue eyes meeting Olivia's. "They said the doctor lives here." "My father was the doctor," she replied automatically. "He's gone now." The man's face fell, but the woman in his arms moaned in pain. "She's been shot, stagecoach robbery. The nearest doctor is 2 days' ride." Olivia hesitated only a moment. "Bring her inside." She quickly cleared her dining table as the man laid the injured woman down. 3 other riders had dismounted and now hovered anxiously in her doorway. "I'm Jake Callahan," the tall man said, removing his hat to reveal sun-streaked brown hair. "These are my men. We were escorting the stage when bandits attacked." Olivia was already examining the wound in the woman's shoulder. "I'm Olivia Montgomery. I assisted my father for years, but I'm not a certified doctor." "Can you help her?" Jake asked, his voice tense with concern. Olivia met his gaze. "I can try. I'll need hot water, clean bandages, and privacy." "Your men can wait outside." To her surprise, Jake nodded without argument and instructed his men to wait on the porch. He remained, rolling up his sleeves. "Just tell me what you need me to do." For the next hour, Olivia worked to extract the bullet and clean the wound, directing Jake to assist her. He followed her instructions precisely, showing none of the doubt or condescension she'd come to expect from men when she demonstrated her medical knowledge. "You've done this before," she observed as he competently applied pressure to stop the bleeding. "Army medic during the war," he explained briefly. "Not as skilled as you, though." The unexpected compliment startled her. "Hold this," she said, handing him a cloth while she prepared a suture. As they worked side by side to save the woman, a passenger named Rebecca Miller, who was traveling to meet her sister Olivia, found herself stealing glances at Jake. He was ruggedly handsome, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often. His hands, though calloused from riding, were surprisingly gentle. When the wound was finally cleaned, stitched, and bandaged, Olivia sat back, exhaustion washing over her. "She'll need rest and careful monitoring for infection, but I believe she'll recover." Jake poured water from a pitcher and handed Olivia a cup. "You're very good at this. Why did you say you weren't a doctor?" "Because legally I'm not," she said, taking a grateful sip. "Women aren't allowed to attend medical school, despite my father's efforts to change that. I learned everything from him." "Well, doctor or not, you just saved Rebecca's life," he said matter-of-factly. "That counts for something in my book." Olivia smiled wryly. "Not in the town council's book, unfortunately. They've given me until tomorrow to leave Willow Creek permanently." Jake's eyebrows shot up. "Leave? Why?" "For speaking my mind about certain improprieties in town governance," she said carefully, unsure how much to reveal to this stranger. and for being unmarried, outspoken, and knowledgeable about things women supposedly shouldn't concern themselves with. Jake studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. That's a shame. Seems to me a town could use someone with your skills. One would think, she agreed dryly. Rebecca stirred on the table with a soft moan, and Olivia immediately went to check on her. We should move her to a bed. She'll be more comfortable. Together, they carefully carried Rebecca to Olivia's bedroom. After settling the patient, Olivia stepped onto the porch to update the waiting men. They expressed their thanks awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with taking orders from a woman but grateful for her help. When she returned inside, Jake was standing by the fireplace, examining a photograph of Olivia with her father. "He looks like a good man," Jake said, setting the frame down carefully. "The best," Olivia confirmed, a lump forming in her throat. He believed women deserved the same opportunities as men. It made him unpopular with certain people in town. Jake nodded thoughtfully. "My mother was like you, smart, outspoken. My father encouraged it, said her mind was what he loved most about her." He smiled at the memory. They ran a ranch together as true partners until they passed. "They sound wonderful," Olivia said, surprised by his openness. "They were." Jake turned to face her fully. "Miss Montgomery, I have a proposition for you." She raised an eyebrow, immediately wary. "Not that kind," he added quickly, a flush creeping up his neck. "I run a cattle operation about 2 days' ride from here, Callahan Ranch. We've got about 20 ranch hands and accidents happen regularly. We sorely need someone with medical knowledge." Olivia blinked in surprise. "You're offering me a job, room and board plus wages," he confirmed. "You'd have your own cabin, complete privacy, and the freedom to practice medicine as you see fit. No one would question your right to speak your mind either." It seemed too good to be true. "Why would you do this?" "You don't know me," Jake shrugged. "I know enough. I know you risked helping strangers when you could have turned us away. I know you have skills that are valuable, and I know what it's like to be judged unfairly." He gestured to the bandana around his neck, which she now noticed concealed a scar. "Not everyone welcomes a former Union soldier in these parts." Olivia considered his offer, her practical nature warring with caution. "What about your men? Would they accept being treated by a woman?" "They'll accept it or find work elsewhere," he said simply. "I've got no patience for that kind of foolishness." Before she could respond, there was another knock at the door. Sheriff Taylor entered without waiting for an invitation, his expression grim when he noticed Jake. "Callahan," he acknowledged with a curt nod. "Taylor," Jake replied coolly. The sheriff turned to Olivia. "I've come to remind you that you need to be gone by noon tomorrow." "I'm aware of my deadline, Sheriff," she replied stiffly. Jake stepped forward. "Miss Montgomery has accepted a position at Callahan Ranch as our resident medical practitioner. I'll be escorting her and her belongings there myself." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Is that so? Seems mighty convenient." "It's a mutually beneficial arrangement," Jake said, his tone making it clear he wouldn't tolerate any challenge. Sheriff Taylor looked between them, then shrugged. "Makes no difference to me where she goes, so long as she's out of town by noon." He touched the brim of his hat. "Good evening to you both." After he left, Olivia turned to Jake. "I haven't accepted your offer yet." "Haven't you?" he asked with a small smile. "Seems to me you don't have many options, and I genuinely need someone with your skills." He was right, of course. What other choice did she have? At least this way she could continue practicing medicine, and the idea of being somewhere she could speak freely was immensely appealing. "What about Rebecca?" she asked, nodding toward the bedroom. "We'll bring her with us if she's well enough to travel. If not, we can wait another day or two outside town limits." Jake picked up his hat. "I should join my men and make arrangements. Will you consider my offer overnight?" Olivia took a deep breath. "I don't need to consider it. I accept." Jake's face broke into a genuine smile that transformed his features, causing an unexpected flutter in Olivia's chest. "Good, we'll leave at first light." He extended his hand and she took it, surprised by the warmth that spread through her at his touch. "Thank you, Mr. Callahan." "Jake," he corrected. "If we're going to be working together, Miss Montgomery, you should call me Jake. Then you must call me Olivia." Their hands remained clasped a moment longer than necessary before Jake released her and headed for the door. "Get some rest, Olivia." Tomorrow begins a new chapter for you." As the door closed behind him, Olivia looked around at the home she was about to leave forever. Instead of the despair she'd felt earlier, a cautious hope had taken root. Perhaps being banished from Willow Creek wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning. Dawn broke with golden light filtering through Olivia's bedroom window. She had spent the night on a chair beside Rebecca, monitoring the injured woman's condition. To her relief, there were no signs of infection, and Rebecca's fever had subsided. After changing the bandages and helping Rebecca drink some water, Olivia finished packing her few remaining possessions. Most precious were her father's medical books and instruments, carefully wrapped and placed in his old leather doctor's bag. Everything else she owned now fit into 2 trunks and a carpet bag. A knock at the door announced Jake's arrival. He stood on her porch looking fresh despite the early hour, his blue shirt bringing out the color of his eyes. "Good morning," he greeted, removing his hat. "How's our patient?" "Better than expected," Olivia replied, stepping aside to let him enter. "Her fever's down and the wound looks clean." Jake nodded approvingly. "I've arranged for a wagon to transport her more comfortably, along with your belongings." He glanced around the nearly empty house. "Is this everything?" "Yes," Olivia said, unable to keep a note of sadness from her voice. "The furniture and anything else I couldn't sell will become town property." Jake's jaw tightened. "That doesn't seem right." "Very little about this situation is right, but I'm making my peace with it." She straightened her shoulders. "I'm ready to leave whenever you are." "My men are loading the wagon now. We should get Rebecca settled first." Jake paused, studying her face. "Are you certain about this decision, Olivia? Coming to work at my ranch," she met his gaze steadily. "More certain than I was yesterday, unless you've changed your mind." "Not at all," he assured her quickly. "I just want to make sure you're not feeling forced into this arrangement. Given the circumstances, I don't have many options," she acknowledged, "but your offer is far better than anything I could have hoped for, and I'm grateful for it." Jake seemed satisfied with her answer. Together, they carefully moved Rebecca to the waiting wagon, where Jake had arranged a makeshift bed of blankets. The young woman was pale but conscious and thanked Olivia profusely for saving her life. "I'm taking you both to my ranch," Jake explained to Rebecca. "It's safer than continuing your journey right now, and Miss Montgomery can continue to care for your wound." Rebecca agreed readily, clearly relieved not to be traveling alone after the stagecoach attack. As Olivia's trunks were loaded onto the wagon, neighbors began to emerge from their houses, watching the proceedings with undisguised curiosity. Some looked ashamed, others vindicated. Mrs. Parker, the baker's wife who had always been kind to Olivia, hurried over with a basket covered with a checkered cloth. "Some bread and preserves for your journey," she whispered, pressing the basket into Olivia's hands. "I'm sorry about all this, dear. Your father would be heartbroken." "Thank you," Olivia said, touched by the small kindness. Mayor Hargrove and Sheriff Taylor appeared on the steps of the town hall, observing her departure with grim satisfaction. Jake noticed them too and moved protectively closer to Olivia. "Anything else you need from inside?" he asked quietly. Olivia took one last look at her childhood home. "No, there's nothing left for me here." Jake helped her onto the wagon seat beside him, his hand steady and strong. As they prepared to depart, Councilman Phillips approached, his expression smug. "I see you found yourself a protector, Miss Montgomery," he said with a knowing smirk. "How convenient." Before Olivia could respond, Jake leaned forward. "Miss Montgomery is my ranch's new medical practitioner, Councilman. I'd advise you to watch your implications carefully." Phillips stepped back, startled by Jake's cold tone. "No offense meant, Callahan, just making conversation." "Then allow me to make conversation as well," Jake replied evenly. "I find it interesting that a town would banish its only remaining person with medical training. Seems short-sighted." The councilman flushed. "That's town business." "Indeed it is," Jake agreed, "and poor business at that." He tipped his hat with mock politeness. "Good day, Councilman." With a flick of the reins, Jake set the wagon in motion. His men fell into formation around them, creating a protective escort. As they reached the edge of town, Olivia couldn't help looking back one last time at the place she'd called home for 22 years. Having second thoughts, Jake asked softly. Olivia shook her head. No, just saying goodbye. The journey to Callahan Ranch took nearly 3 days, traveling at a pace gentle enough for Rebecca's comfort. They camped under the stars each night, with Jake's men taking turns standing watch. Despite her initial apprehension about traveling with a group of cowboys, Olivia found them respectful, if somewhat awkward around her. On the first evening, as they sat around the campfire after a simple meal of beans and bacon, Jake formally introduced her to his men. Tom Reeves, the foreman, brothers Sam and Daniel Cooper, Hank Miller, the oldest at nearly 50, and young Billy White, barely 20 and eager to prove himself. Miss Montgomery will be joining us at the ranch as our medical practitioner, Jake announced. Anyone who has a problem with that can speak now or forever hold their peace. The men exchanged glances but said nothing. Good, Jake continued. She's trained under her father, who was a respected doctor, and she just saved Rebecca's life. You'll treat her with the same respect you'd show any doctor. Understood, a chorus of yes, boss followed, and Olivia felt a surge of gratitude toward Jake for his unwavering support. Later, as the men settled in for the night and Rebecca slept peacefully in the wagon, Jake joined Olivia by the fire. Your men seem decent, she commented, wrapping her shawl tighter against the evening chill. Jake nodded. They're good workers, loyal. Might take some time for them to get used to having a woman doctor, but they'll come around. He offered her a cup of coffee. How are you holding up? I'm fine, she said automatically, then reconsidered. Actually, that's not entirely true. Everything's happened so quickly. 3 days ago, I had a home and a place in the world, even if it wasn't the one I wanted. Now everything's changed. Jake studied her over the rim of his cup. Change can be frightening, but it can also be an opportunity. My father used to say something similar, she said with a small smile. He believed that discomfort was often the precursor to growth. Sounds like a wise man. Jake tossed another log onto the fire. Tell me about him. Olivia found herself opening up, sharing stories about her father's dedication to medicine, his progressive views, and his unwavering belief in her abilities. Jake listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions and sharing some of his own experiences in return. She learned that he had fought for the Union during the Civil War, despite being from a border state where loyalties were divided. After the war, he had worked cattle drives before inheriting land from a childless uncle and establishing his ranch 5 years ago. It wasn't easy at first, he admitted. Some locals resented a Yankee setting up such a large operation. There were incidents. Is that how you got that scar? Olivia asked, nodding toward his neck. Jake's hand unconsciously rose to the bandana. Yes. 3 men decided to teach me a lesson one night in town. Luckily, they were drunk and I was sober. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Things have settled down since then. The ranch is successful and money tends to change people's perspectives. Or at least their willingness to express them openly, Olivia added dryly. Jake laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made her smile in response. Exactly. You do speak your mind, don't you? It's gotten me into considerable trouble, she reminded him. Well, as I said before, Jake replied, his eyes reflecting the firelight, with me, you can say whatever you want. The way he looked at her sent an unexpected warmth through Olivia's chest. For a moment neither spoke, the crackling fire filling the silence between them. Finally, Jake cleared his throat. You should get some rest. We've got another long day tomorrow. As Olivia settled into her bedroll, she found herself wondering about the ranch that would become her new home and the man who had so unexpectedly come to her rescue. Despite everything, a sense of anticipation had begun to replace her grief and anger. Perhaps this banishment was, as her father might have said, the discomfort preceding growth. By mid-afternoon on the 3rd day, the landscape began to change. The flat prairie gave way to gently rolling hills dotted with pine trees, and a creek meandered alongside their trail. In the distance, mountains rose against the horizon. Almost there, Jake announced, pointing ahead where the valley widened. Callahan Ranch lies just beyond that ridge. As they crested the hill, Olivia caught her first glimpse of her new home. The ranch spread across the valley floor, centered around a large two-story house built of logs and stone. A cluster of outbuildings, corrals, and a barn formed the heart of the operation, with cattle grazing on the surrounding grasslands. A bunkhouse stood a short distance from the main house, and several smaller cabins were scattered nearby. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely. Jake's face showed pride as he surveyed his domain. "It's taken a lot of work, but it's coming along. That cabin there," he pointed to a snug-looking structure near a stand of aspens, "will be yours. It used to belong to our previous foreman before Tom took over and moved to the bunkhouse." "It's small but solid." As they approached, activity at the ranch increased. A woman emerged from the main house, shading her eyes against the sun. Workers paused in their tasks to watch the wagon's arrival. "That's Martha," Jake explained. "She runs the household, cooking, cleaning, and generally keeping us all in line. She'll be glad to have another woman around." Martha proved to be a robust woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded Olivia of her schoolteacher. She greeted Jake warmly, then turned curious eyes to Olivia and Rebecca. "So you've brought us 2 new additions," she asked after Jake made introductions. "Miss Miller is recovering from an injury and will be our guest until she's well enough to continue her journey," Jake explained. "Miss Montgomery is our new medical practitioner. She'll be taking the old foreman's cabin." Martha's eyebrows rose slightly, but she showed no other reaction to the news that their new doctor was a woman. "Well, that cabin needs a good airing out, but it's sound. I'll have the boys bring fresh linens and water for washing." She gestured for them to follow her. "Come along then, you both look in need of rest and refreshment." Rebecca was settled in a guest room in the main house, where Olivia checked her wound and found it healing nicely. Martha provided a hearty meal of stew and freshly baked bread, which they ate in the large kitchen while Jake went to oversee the evening ranch operations. "So you're a doctor, are you?" Martha asked as she poured Olivia a cup of tea. "I trained under my father, who was a physician," Olivia clarified, "but I don't hold a formal medical degree." Martha snorted. "Formal degrees mean little out here. Can you set a broken bone, stitch a wound, deliver a baby?" "Yes to all 3, Olivia confirmed. "Then you're a doctor as far as I'm concerned." Martha sat down across from her. "It's about time we had someone with medical knowledge on this ranch. These men are forever injuring themselves in creative ways." Olivia smiled, warming to the older woman. "Jake mentioned that. Jake, is it?" Martha's eyes twinkled with interest. "Not Mr. Callahan?" Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "He asked me to call him Jake." "Did he now?" Martha seemed amused but didn't press further. "Well, he's a good man, our Jake. Best boss I've ever worked for, treats everyone fair. How long have you been here?" Olivia asked, eager to learn more about her new home. "Since the beginning, 4 years ago. My husband worked for Jake's uncle, so when Jake inherited, we came with the property, you might say. Henry, that's my husband, he manages the hay operation." Martha's expression softened. "Jake made sure we had our own place, gave Henry real responsibility. Not many would do that for an older couple." After the meal, Jake returned to escort Olivia to her cabin. Dusk was settling over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The cabin stood a comfortable distance from the main house, close enough for convenience but far enough for privacy. Inside, it was simple but clean, with a main room containing a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs, and a rocking chair near the hearth. A door led to a bedroom just large enough for a bed, a chest of drawers, and a washstand. Martha had indeed been busy. The bed was made up with fresh linens, a fire was laid ready for lighting, and a pitcher of water sat on the washstand. "It's not fancy," Jake said, watching her reaction carefully, "but it's sturdy and warm. The roof doesn't leak and the chimney draws well." "It's perfect," Olivia assured him, running her hand over the smooth wood of the table. After the chaos of the past few days, the simple cabin felt like a sanctuary. "Your trunks will be brought over shortly," Jake continued. "Is there anything else you need tonight?" Olivia shook her head. "You've already done so much, I don't know how to thank you properly." "No thanks necessary. Having a skilled medical person on the ranch will benefit us all." Jake hesitated, then added, "I hope you'll be happy here, Olivia." The sincerity in his voice touched her. "I think I will be." Jake lit the fire for her before leaving, promising to return in the morning to show her around the ranch properly. Alone for the first time in days, Olivia sank into the rocking chair and watched the flames dance in the fireplace. The familiar weight of grief pressed on her heart as she thought of her father and the home she'd lost. Yet alongside it was a new feeling, a tentative hope for this unexpected future. Whatever happened, she was determined to make the most of this opportunity. When her trunks arrived, carried by two ranch hands who nodded respectfully before departing, Olivia unpacked her father's medical books and instruments first, arranging them carefully on a shelf. They represented not just her past, but her future as well. Here, she would be able to practice the healing arts her father had taught her without censure or constraint. As she prepared for bed, exhaustion from the journey finally caught up with her. The last thought she had before drifting off to sleep was of Jake's blue eyes and his promise. "With me, you can say whatever you want." The following weeks brought a steady rhythm to Olivia's new life at Callahan Ranch. Each day began early, with breakfast in the main house alongside Jake, Martha, and various ranch hands. Jake would outline the day's work over coffee and Martha's hearty cooking, occasionally seeking Olivia's input on matters relating to health and safety. She quickly established a routine, converting part of her cabin into a small clinic where ranch workers could come for treatment. A table served as an examination surface, and shelves held her growing collection of medicinals, many gathered from the surrounding countryside based on her father's teachings about natural remedies. Word of her skills spread rapidly after she successfully extracted a deeply embedded splinter from Tom Reeves' hand, a task that had defeated Martha's attempts with a needle. The foreman's grudging thanks and subsequent improvement broke the ice with many of the men, who began to seek her out for various ailments and injuries. Jake provided her with a gentle mare named Daisy, and together they rode the property so Olivia could familiarize herself with the ranch's layout. These rides became the highlight of her days, offering opportunities to learn about ranching operations while enjoying Jake's company. "You sit a horse well," he commented during one such ride as they paused atop a ridge overlooking a valley where cattle grazed. "Most city women I've known are nervous around horses. My father believed in practical education," Olivia explained, adjusting her hat against the bright sunlight. "He thought riding was an essential skill for a doctor in these territories." Jake nodded approvingly. "Smart man." He pointed toward a distant stand of trees. "That's the northern boundary of the ranch. The creek runs year-round there, making it valuable grazing land." Olivia admired the view, struck by the vastness of the ranch compared to the confines of Willow Creek. "How many acres do you have?" "Just over 5,000, Jake replied. "Small compared to some operations, but good quality land with reliable water. We're running about 1,200 head of cattle now with room to expand." "It's impressive what you've built here," she said sincerely. Jake looked pleased. "It's a work in progress. Every year we make improvements." He hesitated, then added, "I have plans to build a proper schoolhouse next year. We've got several families working for us now, with more children coming along. They deserve an education." Olivia smiled, touched by his concern for his workers' children. "That's a wonderful idea. Education changes lives." "My thoughts exactly." Jake's expression turned thoughtful. "Maybe you could help with that too if you were interested. You're clearly well educated." "I'd love to," she said, surprised and delighted by the suggestion. "Teaching was actually my mother's profession before she married my father." "Then it's in your blood," Jake said with a warm smile that made Olivia's heart beat a little faster. As they continued their tour, Olivia found herself studying Jake when he wasn't looking. In the weeks since her arrival, her initial gratitude had developed into genuine admiration. He ran the ranch with a firm but fair hand, treating his workers with respect regardless of their background. Several of his ranch hands were former slaves, others Mexican or Native American, all working alongside white cowboys with an equality she had rarely witnessed elsewhere. Jake, for his part, seemed equally interested in her opinions and experiences. During their rides or evening conversations on her porch, he listened attentively to her ideas about medicine or her stories about assisting her father. Unlike most men of her acquaintance, he never dismissed her knowledge or spoke down to her. Rebecca Miller stayed at the ranch for 2 weeks while recovering from her wound. During that time, she and Olivia became friends, with Rebecca sharing stories of her life in St. Louis and her plans to join her sister in Oregon. "You're fortunate to have found a place here," Rebecca commented the day before her departure as they sat on the porch of the main house. "Mr. Callahan seems like a good man." "He is," Olivia agreed, perhaps too quickly based on Rebecca's knowing smile. "And handsome too," her friend added casually. "I've noticed how he looks at you when you're not watching." Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Don't be ridiculous, he's my employer." Rebecca laughed softly. "If you say so, but I've seen that look before." My Herbert had the same expression before he proposed. Despite her protests, Olivia found herself thinking about Rebecca's words long after her friend continued her journey west. Was it possible that Jake saw her as more than just the ranch's medical practitioner? The idea both thrilled and terrified her. One afternoon, while organizing her supplies, Olivia was interrupted by an urgent knock. Opening the door, she found young Billy White, his face pale with worry. "Miss Montgomery, you gotta come quick. Boss got thrown from his horse out by the east pasture. Tom says his leg looks bad." Grabbing her medical bag, Olivia rushed to saddle Daisy. Billy led her to where several men had gathered around Jake, who was sitting propped against a tree, his face tight with pain. His right leg was stretched out awkwardly before him, the denim of his jeans torn and bloodied. "About time someone fetched the doctor," he said with a strained attempt at humor as Olivia dismounted. "Though I told them it wasn't necessary." "I'll be the judge of that," she replied briskly, kneeling beside him to examine the injury. The fall had resulted in a deep gash along his thigh where he'd landed on a broken branch, and his ankle was already swelling, suggesting a sprain or possible fracture. Olivia cleaned the wound carefully, grateful that it looked worse than it was painful but not life-threatening. "You'll need stitches," she informed him, "and that ankle needs to be wrapped and rested. No riding for at least a week." Jake grimaced. "A week?" "Olivia, we're in the middle of moving the herd to summer pastures." "Then your men will have to manage without you," she said firmly. "Unless you'd prefer to risk permanent damage," Tom Reeves, standing nearby, chuckled. "She's got you there, boss. We can handle the cattle. You just focus on healing up." With the men's help, they fashioned a makeshift stretcher and transported Jake back to the ranch house. In his bedroom, a spacious room she had never entered before, Olivia carefully stitched the gash on his thigh, conscious of his gaze on her face as she worked. "You have a very steady hand," he commented, his voice slightly rough from the whiskey Martha had provided for the pain. "Essential for good stitchwork," she replied, focusing on her task to avoid meeting his intense blue eyes. "Hold still, I'm almost finished." After bandaging both wounds and giving strict instructions about keeping weight off the injured ankle, Olivia prepared to leave. Jake caught her hand as she was gathering her supplies. "Thank you," he said softly. "Not just for this, but for everything you've brought to the ranch. Things are better with you here." His words, combined with the warmth of his hand around hers, sent a flutter through her chest. "I'm glad to be useful," she managed to say. "It's more than that," Jake insisted, still holding her hand. "You've changed things for the better. Made this place feel more like a real home." Before Olivia could respond, Martha entered with a tray of food, causing her to quickly withdraw her hand from Jake's grasp. If the housekeeper noticed anything, she didn't comment, merely instructing Jake to eat and rest while shooting Olivia a knowing look that made her blush. Over the next few days, Olivia checked on Jake's injuries regularly. Confined to the house and restless, he used these visits as opportunities for lengthy conversations. They discussed books they had both read, shared childhood memories, and debated current events with an openness that Olivia found exhilarating. During one such visit, as a summer thunderstorm raged outside, Jake revealed more about his past than he had previously shared. I never planned to be a rancher, he admitted, watching raindrops streak the window beside his bed. Before the war, I was studying law in Pennsylvania. What changed? Olivia asked, seated in a chair beside him. Jake's expression darkened. Everything, the war, it alters your perspective. After what I'd seen, sitting in a stuffy office arguing legal points seemed meaningless. He absently touched the scar on his neck. I wanted open spaces, honest work. When my uncle left me this land, it felt like providence. Do you ever regret the change? She asked. Jake considered the question seriously. No, the law might have made me wealthier, but this life has made me happier. His eyes met hers, especially lately. The implication hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Olivia felt her pulse quicken. A knock interrupted them as Martha entered with coffee. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that went beyond friendship or professional respect. As Jake recovered, Olivia found herself thinking of him constantly. His injury had revealed a vulnerability beneath his capable exterior that touched her deeply. The more time they spent together, the more she recognized that her feelings for him had grown into something she had never experienced before. By the time Jake was able to resume his duties, autumn was approaching. The ranch bustled with preparations for winter hay being stored, repairs made to buildings, supplies stockpiled. Olivia's services were in high demand as men pushed themselves to complete tasks before the weather turned, resulting in various injuries that required her attention. One crisp September evening, Jake invited her to join him for a ride to his favorite spot on the property. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the landscape as they followed a trail up into the foothills, finally stopping at a rocky outcropping that offered a panoramic view of the entire ranch and the surrounding valley. It's breathtaking, Olivia said as they dismounted. The ranch buildings looked like toys from this height, and the grazing cattle were mere dots on the landscape. I come here to think, Jake explained, spreading a blanket on a flat section of rock. From his saddlebag, he produced a small bundle containing bread, cheese, and apples. I thought you might enjoy the view and the company. They sat side by side, enjoying the simple meal and watching the sun begin its descent toward the mountains. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the occasional call of a hawk circling overhead. Are you happy here, Olivia? Jake asked suddenly, his voice serious. She turned to look at him, struck by the intensity in his blue eyes. Yes, very much so. Why do you ask? Jake seemed to choose his words carefully. When you first came here, it was out of necessity. You didn't have many options. Now that you've had time to settle in, I wanted to make sure you don't feel trapped. Trapped is the last word I would use to describe my life here, she assured him. I have meaningful work, respect, freedom to speak my mind. She smiled softly, and good friends. Friends, Jake repeated, looking out at the vista. Is that how you see me? As a friend? Olivia's heart began to race. Well, yes, of course, but Jake turned to face her fully. Because I find myself thinking of you as considerably more than a friend, Olivia. And I've been wondering if perhaps you might feel the same. The directness of his words both startled and thrilled her. Jake, I understand if you don't, he continued quickly. You're an extraordinary woman who could have her pick of suitors in any city. And I'm just a rancher with more cattle than refinement. Stop, Olivia said firmly, placing her hand on his arm. That's not how I see you at all. Hope flickered in his eyes. How do you see me? I see a man of integrity and compassion, she said, finding courage in his vulnerability. Someone who values people for their character rather than their background or gender, who listens when others speak and considers their views, even when they differ from his own. She took a deep breath. A man I've grown to care for very deeply. Jake's expression softened. Deeply enough to consider a future together. What exactly are you asking, Jake Callahan? Olivia's voice trembled slightly. In answer, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object that caught the fading sunlight. A ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond that sparkled like a captured star. I'm asking if you would do me the honor of becoming my wife, he said, his voice husky with emotion. I love you, Olivia Montgomery. I think I've loved you since that first night when you saved Rebecca's life with such confidence and skill." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Jake's face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he cupped her face gently in his calloused hands and kissed her, a tender meeting of lips that quickly deepened with shared passion. Olivia's arms encircled his neck, drawing him closer as years of propriety gave way to the love that had been building between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, the sun was setting in earnest, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. "We should head back," Jake said reluctantly, though he made no move to rise. "It'll be dark soon." Olivia nodded but remained nestled against him, her head on his shoulder. "Just a few more minutes," she murmured, wanting to savor this perfect moment. As they watched the sunset together, Jake spoke of his hopes for their future, expanding the ranch, building that schoolhouse, perhaps starting a family of their own. Olivia shared her own dreams of establishing a proper clinic to serve not just the ranch but surrounding homesteads as well. "Together we can accomplish all of it," Jake said, kissing her forehead. "Partners in everything." "Partners," Olivia agreed, thinking how far she had come from that day in the Willow Creek town hall. Being banished had seemed like the end of her world then. Now she recognized it as the beginning of something far better than she could have imagined. As twilight deepened around them, they reluctantly mounted their horses for the ride home. The ranch lights twinkled in the distance, a beacon guiding them back to what was now truly Olivia's home, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had chosen it, and it had chosen her. News of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch. Martha was unsurprised but delighted, confessing she had been hoping for this outcome since Olivia's arrival. The ranch hands offered congratulations with varying degrees of enthusiasm and awkwardness, though Tom Reeves did admit that "the boss has been happier since you came along, madam." They decided on a November wedding, giving them time to prepare while avoiding the worst of winter weather. Jake sent for a proper minister from Denver, and invitations went out to neighboring ranchers and friends. Olivia found herself swept up in wedding preparations, with Martha's enthusiastic assistance. The older woman helped her design a wedding dress using fabric ordered from Denver, and together they planned a celebration that would be simple but meaningful. "Have you thought about inviting anyone from Willow Creek?" Martha asked one afternoon as they worked on the dress. "Family, friends, perhaps," Olivia's hands stilled on the fabric. "I don't think anyone would come," she said quietly. "They made their feelings quite clear when they banished me." Martha's expression turned sympathetic. "Sometimes people surprise you, and a wedding is a fine occasion for reconciliation." Though doubtful, Olivia eventually sent invitations to Mrs. Parker, her father's old friend Dr. Wilson, who had retired to Cheyenne, and a few others who had shown kindness during her difficult final days in Willow Creek. She deliberately did not invite any members of the town council. As their wedding day approached, Olivia found unexpected joy in planning her future with Jake. They spent evenings discussing how to combine their lives and work, with Jake insisting that her medical practice remain a priority. "I've been thinking," he said one evening as they sat before the fire in the main house. "The old storage building near your cabin could be converted into a proper clinic. It's large enough for an examination room, a recovery space, and storage for supplies." Olivia looked at him in surprise. "That would be wonderful, but it's a significant undertaking." "We can afford it," Jake assured her. "The ranch had its best year yet, and investing in the health of our workers and neighbors makes good business sense." He squeezed her hand. "Besides, I want you to have the tools you need to do what you love." His support meant everything to her. Unlike the men of Willow Creek who had feared and resented her knowledge, Jake celebrated it, encouraging her to expand her skills and practice. 2 weeks before the wedding, a letter arrived from Dr. Wilson in Cheyenne, accepting their invitation and expressing his delight at Olivia's new path. He also included an unexpected piece of news. Mayor Hargrove and Councilman Phillips of Willow Creek had been arrested for embezzlement of town funds, just as Olivia had suspected. It seems your banishment was indeed to silence you, Jake said after reading the letter. Your father must have discovered their scheme before his death. Olivia felt a bittersweet vindication. I wish he could have seen them brought to justice. He raised a daughter brave enough to stand up to them, Jake said, drawing her close. I think he would be proud of that legacy. The day before their wedding, guests began arriving at the ranch. Dr. Wilson came bearing a gift, her father's medical diploma, which he had rescued from the town hall archives before it could be destroyed. He would have wanted you to have this, the elderly doctor told her, his eyes misty. Edmund always said you were the finest doctor he ever trained, degree or no degree. To Olivia's surprise, Mrs. Parker also made the journey from Willow Creek, along with 3 other families who had quietly supported her. Their presence was a healing balm to old wounds, a reminder that not everyone had approved of her banishment. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, with just enough chill in the air to color the aspen leaves golden. The ceremony took place on the front lawn of the main house, where chairs had been arranged in rows, and an arch of autumn flowers marked the spot where they would exchange vows. In the small bedroom that had been set aside for her preparations, Olivia stood before a mirror as Martha made final adjustments to her dress, a creation of ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Her auburn hair was arranged in soft curls, adorned with small white flowers. You look beautiful, Martha declared, stepping back to admire her work. Your father would be so proud to see you today. Tears threatened to spill, but Olivia blinked them back. I wish he could be here to give me away. A knock at the door interrupted them. Doctor. Wilson entered, looking distinguished in his Sunday best. I was wondering, he said hesitantly, if you might allow an old friend of your father's the honor of escorting you down the aisle. Olivia embraced him gratefully. Nothing would make me happier. When the time came, Olivia stepped out onto the porch with Dr. Wilson at her side. The gathered guests, ranch workers, neighboring ranchers, and friends rose to their feet, but Olivia's eyes were fixed on Jake, waiting for her beneath the flower arch. He looked handsome in a new dark suit, his hair neatly combed, but it was his expression that took her breath away, a look of such love and pride that she felt it like a physical warmth enveloping her. With steady steps, she walked toward her future, toward the man who had offered her not just sanctuary but partnership. As Dr. Wilson placed her hand in Jake's, Olivia felt a sense of rightness, of coming home in the truest sense. The minister's words washed over her as she and Jake exchanged vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other for all their days. When Jake slipped a second ring onto her finger to join her engagement band, his hands were steady but his eyes shone with emotion. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister declared. You may kiss your bride. Jake's kiss was gentle yet filled with promise, sealing their commitment before their community. As they turned to face their guests, now as Mr. and Mrs. Callahan, applause erupted across the lawn. The celebration that followed was joyous, with tables laden with food, music from a fiddle player Jake had hired from town, and dancing that continued well into the evening. Olivia found herself passed from partner to partner as ranch hands awkwardly but sincerely offered their congratulations before Jake finally reclaimed her for the last dance. Happy, Mrs. Callahan? He asked, holding her close as they swayed beneath lantern light. Completely, she assured him, resting her head against his chest, though it may take some getting used to my new name. You can always remain Dr. Montgomery professionally, Jake suggested. I rather like being married to a doctor. Olivia looked up at him with a smile. And I rather like being married to a man who supports my work. As the celebration wound down and guests departed for their homes or the accommodations arranged for them, Jake led Olivia toward the main house, their home now. They had decided that her cabin would become solely her clinic, while they would live together in the larger house. In their bedroom, now filled with both his belongings and hers, Jake kissed her with growing passion, his hands gentle as he helped her out of her wedding dress. Their lovemaking was tender yet ardent, a physical expression of the love and respect that had grown between them over the months since her arrival at the ranch. Afterward, lying in his arms as moonlight filtered through the curtains, Olivia reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here from the pain of banishment to the joy of finding a true partner and home. "What are you thinking about?" Jake asked, stroking her hair. "About how sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best," she replied. "If I hadn't been banished from Willow Creek, I would never have found you." Jake kissed her forehead. "Their loss is very definitely my gain." "And mine," Olivia added, snuggling closer to her husband. "I never imagined I could be this happy." "This is just the beginning," Jake promised. "We have our whole lives ahead of us." The years that followed proved the truth of his words. Together, they built the clinic Olivia had dreamed of, which soon became known throughout the region for its quality care. Ranchers and homesteaders traveled considerable distances to seek treatment from Dr. Montgomery Callahan, as she became professionally known. The schoolhouse Jake had planned was constructed the following spring, with Olivia teaching basic medical knowledge alongside traditional subjects. When a proper teacher was eventually hired, Olivia continued to give special lectures on health and hygiene. Callahan Ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Jake's business acumen combined with Olivia's organizational skills created an operation that became a model for others in the territory. They introduced innovative ranching methods and were among the first to experiment with new breeding techniques to improve their stock. 2 years after their wedding, Olivia gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Elizabeth, after Jake's mother. A son, James, followed 18 months later. Both children grew up with their mother's inquisitive mind and their father's strong sense of justice. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their home watching their children play in the yard, Jake presented Olivia with a surprise: the deed to her father's house in Willow Creek, which he had quietly purchased when it came up for auction. "I thought you might want to turn it into a clinic for the town," he explained. "They've been without proper medical care since you left." Tears filled Olivia's eyes at his thoughtfulness. "That would be a fitting tribute to my father." The Willow Creek Clinic opened the following year, staffed by a young doctor Olivia had trained, with regular visits from Olivia herself. The town that had once banished her now welcomed her expertise, the old council having been replaced by more progressive leadership. As Olivia and Jake entered middle age, their partnership only deepened. They weathered challenges together: droughts, harsh winters, economic downturns, always emerging stronger for having faced them as a team. Their children grew into capable adults who shared their parents' values and vision. On the 20th anniversary of her arrival at the ranch, Jake organized a celebration that brought together the extended community that had formed around them. Standing beside her husband, surrounded by friends, children, and the many people whose lives they had touched, Olivia reflected on the strange twist of fate that had led her here. "Thank you," she whispered to Jake as they stood hand in hand, watching the sunset from the same rocky outcropping where he had proposed. "For what?" he asked, his hair now streaked with silver but his blue eyes still bright with love. "For finding me when I was lost. For giving me a place where I could speak my mind and use my skills. For being my partner in everything." She squeezed his hand. "For loving me as I am." Jake drew her close, his arms as strong and sure as they had been 20 years before. "Loving you has been the easiest and best thing I've ever done," he said simply. "And I plan to keep doing it for at least another 20 years. "At least," Olivia agreed with a smile, leaning into his embrace as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors that had illuminated the beginning of their journey together. In the gathering twilight, they made their way back to the ranch, to the home and life they had built together, founded on respect, strengthened by love, and enriched by the freedom to always speak their minds.